My name is Alexandria. Okay, just need to accept that. And, oh, well, first let me quickly introduce myself. So I just saw by the slide, my name is Alexandria. I am the workshop host for today on behalf of Qoom for Intro into HTML and CSS. Now, I saw a lot in the chat that many people don't know any experience or haven't coded in a language before. And I'll tell you, this is the course perfect for you. That was not English. This is the perfect course for you because what we're going to be doing is all online. If you saw in the hack pack, there's no downloading involved. You just need your Wi-Fi and passion for learning. Since you're here now, that is it. So I'm going to start sharing my screen and first explain how to log in into our IDE, basically our coding text editor on the web, and then I'll introduce us to what is HTML, what is CSS, what is their syntax, and then start coding. So let me drop some links in the chat so everyone can follow along. This link is where you can sign up to create your Qoom account. So again, that's going to be your IDE where we're going to be coding everything. And then this is where you can demo our project. So in the end of this workshop, hopefully you will have something that looks a little like this journal. So you got different colors, you got different like sections, different spacing of stuff, and you'll learn all the technical ways to do that in this workshop. So if everyone can navigate over to qoom.io and hit sign up along with your name, last name, and an email, let's say something like that, and just hit create an account. That'd be great. So I already have an account. I'm not gonna log in, but I'm gonna log in to show you what's the next step, and then I'll give you guys time to sign in over the account. So you'll probably be prompted to enter your password again. Once you create your account, do that. It's the same thing. It'll take you right to your coding space. So this is where you see all of your different projects, or you will see all of your different projects and your folders. If you coded before, this would look like what you'd have in your local, I guess, user. This will look a little bit empty. Mine just looks full because I've been using Qoom for a while, but this is the coding space. This is the next step into creating your journal. So once you log into your account with at qoom.io, you can navigate over to your coding space. I'll give you guys a few seconds to do that because trust me, you're going to be wanting to do this along, or and also after the workshop, drop the tutorial link so you can do it asynchronously. But we'll have time at the end of this hour, to go over any questions you guys have or any bugs in your code. And I'll show you guys how to publish your code and your website so I can not only edit, but offer any suggestions. Oh, okay. I'll hopefully be monitoring chat, but that's also what Nara is here for as well. And so also feel free to unmute if you have any questions or drop it in chat, as I just said. And then to answer the question of which links we should use, I will drop the link to create your account. And then Nara just said that that's the link to the tutorial. So all the things I'm going to be covering along with resources to help further your programming journey are also in that tutorial link. So feel free to check that out after this workshop or even now so you can get caught up. Okay. Hopefully everyone inserted their name and their email and created an account. You guys should be in your coding space, which looks like this, sort of. And now we're going to actually create the project folder that's going to house all the files that has our code in it. So the way to do that, Qoom makes it super easy. You just have to click this button. Let me zoom out of my way. Okay. you just have to click this button that says New Project over on the right, and then name your project. So I'm going to name mine Journal We, and then hit create. And so once you hit create, you then should be prompted to a new tab, which will be your IDE. This looks a little overwhelming, but don't worry, I'll explain each of the sections, and then we're going to get into writing your first lines of code if you haven't already.
Alexa,
Mhm.
are these links in the hack pack? Actually,
Yes.
I think Samantha. Okay, I see.
Okay, so once you create your new project and name it, you should head over, or you should be already moved over to your IDE, and I'll start explaining what all these are. So going from left to right, what we have is the actual files within the Journal We folder, or whatever you named your project to. And we have a little README Markdown, which Markdown is just a type of protocol or language, a way you can write your text and content. We won't be so much editing Markdown, but this is a good beginning file to kind of name your project and get a general consensus of what you're coding and what we're doing. The index.html file, which should be your next file as well, sets you up with some basic HTML content. I'll be explaining a little more about the syntax and how to write HTML in just a second, but this is one of the two main files we're going to be coding in. Next, I'll briefly explain project.json. Again, it's just another type of language. This is more so that when the computer reads your project folder, it knows what to show to the user. So for example, it will show the home page with the path index.html. So it will show your HTML page. Your script.js is your JavaScript file. We won't be covering JavaScript, but I also see that some of you have already coded in it. Basically, it is the backend for anything web development. We have a bunch of tutorials, and I believe SuperPOSITRON has different workshops that will cover JavaScript and other languages. But for now, we're going to stick to beginning in HTML and CSS. JavaScript is super fun once you get to it. So I hope you do. Sorry. And then styles.css. So CSS is the other file we're going to be coding a lot in and writing our content. And then we have another menu below your file structure, and that is the collab link. So join beta testing, yes, no. I'll show you collabing in just a second, but basically we're able to give you a link that will allow you to live edit other people's files, and they'll be able to see your users. So it's kind of like a video game where everyone can see all of your you editing on the same file, and they can make changes. Display is going to be showing this panel, which is your website, on a new window. Get link is the publishing stuff. I'll cover all that later. But right now I'm just going to head over to the settings icon and actually change my font size so you can see my text here on the left just a little bit clearer. And in this settings icon, you can change basically anything, personalize your coding editor as much as you want. So that was a brief overview of the coding editor and the panels to your left and right. Now, if you can join me in heading over to your HTML file, I'll start by explaining what is HTML and CSS. 15 minutes into the workshop. Here we go. So you don't have to follow along. I'll just be going over to Qoom.io or any kind of website to kind of visualize more what is HTML and CSS. So HTML. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It is what you can think of the backbone. It is the actual protocol that all websites are written in or processed to be in their bare minimum. So programming languages like React and frameworks like Gatsby and Next.js are built off of HTML, but written in JavaScript. So that's the kind of connection with these big languages, these big libraries and frameworks that you hear in the web development sector. And then the syntax of HTML, we can actually start doing this right now. HTML is organized by semantic elements, which are just basically closing and opening tags to divide the content in your website. So you have this HTML tag and its closing tag, which you can see with the / and then the name again, and then a caret. And then within that, you have the child head tag, closing tag, link tag, which will links us to this file, to the style sheet file, which is your CSS. And then it links you to the JavaScript file as well. And then within your body tag is actually where we'll be coding in. So if you want to join me, you can do a caret, P, and a closing caret. Now what we just did is create a paragraph element within the body tag. So this paragraph element, we could put text in like, hello world. And then watch it automatically update in the website. So you can see it on your right. And then as you can see, there is going to be parents and children. I kind of alluded to this in the beginning. So it's basically elements within elements. And that's kind of the language of HTML and CSS, or sorry, HTML. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. So Cascading Style Sheets is a way to style your content and customize different properties like your background color, your fonts, the positioning of your elements, which again are like these little tags, positioning of your elements, and sizing, if I haven't already said that. And so the cascading part in Cascading Style Sheets just means it's running on the same kind of system or process that HTML is. So you have parents and you have children, and you can be able to style, say like the parent, and the styling would go down to the children, stuff like that. We'll be working a lot more with parents and children and kind of that styling later on down this workshop. But for now, let's actually style the paragraph tag we wrote. So the way that CSS syntax works is that you have a declaration block, which is like this. It is denoted by the name of the element or ID or class that you want to style. So for us, it'd be the paragraph element, and then curly brackets. And so you can do your first curly bracket and then hit enter, and then the coding editor will immediately give you your closing bracket, which is, I believe, what happened as well with the paragraph tags. So within the curly brackets, you can have a property like color, and then you could denote it with a colon and then the actual value you want it. So the property color can have a couple of different values, red, for example, and then you close it with a semicolon. And now what that does is the color of your font is now red. So that is how HTML and CSS communicate. And if you're following along, that is just a quick demo of what we'll be doing. So next steps, if you're also following along the tutorial, I'll be going on to part 2, tutorial article. Next steps is to actually start coding the journal. What I just did was introduce you to the syntax of HTML and CSS. So with HTML, in order to start coding this beautiful journal, it only takes 3 lines, I think. You have your nav element, your main element, if I can spell, and your footer element. So quick explanation to what the nav element is. If you don't already know, nav usually stands for navigation. So in websites like Qoom.io, it is the content that's kind of stuck at the top of the web page, no matter what you click on or where you go. Versus the footer element, it's stuck at the very bottom of the web page. So this is where usually your attributes or any sort of links to any other social medias, like you can see here, will go as well. For us, the nav, you would have links to other things and the title of your website. For me, I want to say journal. And then for the footer, I don't really have anything I want to attribute, but I'll just say copyright Qoom. All right. So sorry, I paused without saying I was pausing. This is basically the shell of like the skeleton of what our journal is in 3 lines in HTML. That is basically all. And so I'm going to hop over to CSS and I'm going to style the CSS, and then I'll give you guys time to also follow along. So with the style of the CSS, it's going to look a little more complicated, but it's going to say the same thing. So I'm actually first going to use a universal selector. So remember how I said that the top of the decoration block is the name of whatever you want to write? The universal selector, denoted by an asterisk, which I believe is Shift 8 for most keyboards, is basically means that whatever styling you put inside this block is going to be styled for all elements within the web page. So we're going to do some basic housekeeping in order to have our styles fit normally. What I mean is, if you notice on the right side of your panel, you see this little spacing between the edge of your web page and the beginning of the content. That we'll learn further. It's called margin. And the browser actually has default padding and margin. And we don't want to use that because we'll be styling our margin and padding later on. And margin padding, later on, I'll explain exactly the difference between them. But for right now, you can think about them as the spacing within the elements. So now you can see that after I did margin equals 0 pixels and padding equals 0 pixels, there's a couple other ways you can measure pixels or width. You can use viewport height and viewport width. Now that makes the page a little bit more responsive because the viewport changes with the user screen, like an iPhone or a computer. But for now, we will just use pixels. And then you can actually keep it for 0 to just the shorthand. So these are the same. You'll see more that there are certain default values for that the computer just gives elements if we do not specify them. So we didn't need to specify pixels, and the computer already assumed it's pixels. Okay, outside of margin and padding, we are going to do our first customization break. So I'm going to drop a link in chat to what I think is kind of the second fun thing in this workshop, and that is choosing our font. So if you could all follow along that link, it is Google Fonts or fonts.google.com. We're just gonna clean a bit of tabs right now and put that in light mode. So what I want to do is actually style these fonts, which is basically the way that the text will look. I think this font is a little boring, so I'll be able to change it. And just like Google Docs, all you need to do is select which font you want, or any sort of text editor, which font you want, and tell the computer that's the font I want, and all of the font will change unless specified otherwise. So for me, this is the time to pick any kind of font you want to have in your journal. Now, there are some less easily read fonts, and there are some boring fonts. These are all my opinions, but feel free to choose whatever you want. And so now you can start customizing your journal. For me, I'm going to pick Ubuntu. I love that distro. Okay. And so once you click a font, you'll be given the different subfamilies of that font family. So for example, you have light 300, light italic, regular, and then so on and so on with bold. I'm going to choose regular 400, which is kind of the middle for me. And once you dismiss that message, you'll see this panel on the right. And if you're starting to realize, you recognize that this is a caret and a name and a closing caret. And that looks a lot like HTML syntax. And if you guessed that, you're very much right. So this button and code snippet is written in HTML. And this is a way to get your font family in HTML directly. So as you can, I'm just going to quickly navigate over to HTML file. You can see that the HTML is the background. It is what the computer is going to read first. And you have the style sheet, which will only be read because it's linked from the HTML file in this line right here. You can do the same thing and write your styles actually directly in line in your HTML file, like this, just a style tag. And then write in CSS, like body, then closing, stuff like that. That's one way to write a CSS. But in this workshop, we're going to be covering external styling. So that is just styling in a different file. Okay. Tangent over, back to here. So you can directly import the font family to HTML file. But that's a lot of lines of code. So I'm just going to click the second button, and that is an import import command written in CSS. So cascading style sheet within the style tags. Here we go. So if you want to import your font family to your journal, all you need to do is copy this one line of code and navigate over to a CSS file. And another important thing is that the computer reads your styles file, your style sheet, top to bottom. So the way you want to think about it is kind of like a funnel. You want all of your general / universal styling on the top, and then all of your specific styling for specific elements, specific IDs and classes, which we'll be going over later in this tutorial, at the bottom of your file. So I'm going to put the import URL, which is just telling the computer to head over to this website and take this font family, the regular 400. And now we, okay, moving my zoom again. So now we want to write that everything is in this font family, because we just imported the font family. Now we have to write that we're wanting everything to be in that font family, as I just said. So within the universal selector styling, you can create a new line and then copy this line from fonts.google.com. And this is, if you start realizing as well, looks like another line of written in CSS. It is the property value, the colon, and then the property, colon, and then the values to that property, like Ubuntu sans serif, and then denoted the ending with a semicolon. So you can copy that line and just paste it in there. And so now, hopefully you'll see that all the text in your website is immediately updated to have your font. So I'm going to close out of that tab, but I'll give you guys time to kind of set that up as well. And then of course, if I'm going too fast, please let me know in chat. And then if I'm also going too slow, please kindly let me know in chat as well. But I'm going to give you guys a few seconds to follow along. To answer Olivia's question in chat, yes. If you head over to the link that Nara dropped before, it should take you to the article tutorial or the tutorial. And then here's the parts which I was referencing. So right now I'm on part 2, creating the layout. But in part 3, you can actually see the demo website and also the source code for it. Yeah, so I can repeat the first step. So starting from the very beginning, if you head over to fonts.google.com and choose your font, I'm going to try to find my font. Okay, I tried. That was not the font, but anyway, click on a font. and head over to the specific subfamily styling you want. So you want to select this style, or you could essentially download the whole family, but we don't need all the different styling like italic and bold, because the different weights, which are italic and bold, can be accessed through doing it in CSS. For example, like font weight and bold. That's one way you can make everything bold, instead of having it be directed from this font family or taking it from Google. But anyway, click on the style and then scroll past that thing in review and click on import or link. You can do this either way. And then all you need to do is simply follow the steps that Google has outlined. So you can copy this line, put it into your HTML, and copy this into your CSS, as it says in this file. Or you can do what I did, which is click over to the @import button, copy this line, regardless of the style tags, and put it into your CSS file. So you can see that I did that right here. At the very top of my file, you want to make sure to import your font family at the very top, because the font family you usually want to be the styling for every single element. So you want to have the styling for every single element at the top of your file. And once you're done with that, you can then copy paste this line for your font family and paste that in. All right, okay. Hopefully that gave you guys enough time. I'm going to continue on by styling the Navbar. This looks, yeah, because the journal looks a little bit different than the demo project. So head over to your HTML file, and there's actually one thing I wanted to change. Now, aside from nav main footer, there are other different elements, like I introduced, paragraph tag, that HTML also has for certain default styling. So for example, this H1 tag is stands for header 1, and you have H1, H2, H3, header 1, header 2, header 3. And as you can see, it gives it certain default styling. Now, this is what I was kind of alluding to in the beginning, that the computer has default styling if not specified. And for example, the journal tag is now bold, or now more bold and more big than like a paragraph tag. And to style this, we're going to head over to our CSS, and I'm actually going to drop a link ahead of time in chat, like that, and that is to a color wheel. So first, we're going to call out our nav element, curly brackets, boom, bam, bim, and we're going to have a width 100%. Well, percentage is also another way to measure the size of elements. And that's really nice because, again, it's super responsive to whatever the user is reading on, whatever the viewport is. And you'll see that almost nothing changes, but actually, if I go to display, and if I want to inspect this element, so once you hit display, this is completely optional, but I'd like to kind of visualize what I'm talking about with the width. So if I hit inspect, which is Control-Shift-I or function 11 for some computers, and then look over to this H1 element. So this developer tools, is a great way to access your elements and also any other source files you have, like your script or style. But right now, I'm just going to focus on the elements tab. And what you can see is when I scroll down over in the CSS file, the width is 644 pixels. And that changes as I zoom in on the web page and don't, because it's 100% when we styled it. And what that means, I'm just going to go back to my coding editor and click the right arrow to open up the website again on the right side. What that means is that now that the element spans 100% of the screen, I could center the text like so. It's now the text is centered. And what I want, just gonna close that tab out, is as you saw in the demo journal, there was spacing at the top and at the bottom. I'm gonna see if I can pick up the link where the demo journal was one more time. Yes, as you can see, there's spacing at the top and the bottom. And that spacing is specifically denoted by padding. So that is the property padding top. and then arbitrary value like 20 pixels, and padding bottom 20 pixels. So these certain values, like with 100%, 20 pixels, is the customization part. You can change whatever you want. That look, focusing back on the website, that looks a little bit weird, but and it's really hard to kind of visualize what the padding is, what the spacing is. But if I put this to a color, and I'm just going to copy this directly from the website. Oh, sorry, not color. Color, I actually want to make it white, but I'll do that in just a second. I want to change the background color, which you can do by background color, or you could do by the background property, either way. And then paste in this 6-digit code with the hashtag in front of it. And what that is, I'm gonna make this white real quick, so now you can see the beautiful journal tag. What that is a way to measure color, or a way to code color in hex decimals. So the link I dropped ahead of time is a link to a color wheel. Basically, you can pick any color you want, like say this beautiful purple, or use a slider and pick a very specific color. And what that will do is W3 Schools, the computer, will, or I guess the web page, will generate different ways to categorize that color. So there's 3 ways you can categorize it. Hex decimals, which is denoted by the hashtag, as I said before. RGB, which is red, green, blue, which is just out of, I believe, 255. These are the amount of red, green, and blue that is in this color. So like your computer screen, and if anybody's ever watched WandaVision, all of the little pixels are just blue and red and green. So there's no like true yellow, as some people say, but anyway. And so you can change the amount of red, green, and blue to basically have any color. But right now we're going to focus on hexadecimals because this is the most, as you can see, concise way of writing your colors and code. So if you want this dark, nice purple, you can copy paste that into your styles like so, and then you get a nice dark purple. Let's actually keep it there because why not? So I believe now that I colored out the element, I can more clearly explain what is padding. So if I, not over that journal, if I display my journal and head back over to the developer tools with Control-Shift-I or Function 11 or right click, depending on if what your computer is, if you want to follow. And then I head over to my Nav element, you'll see just hovering over this orange bar inside the blue element. What that is trying to show you is the spacing. The orange bar is the padding we put on top and the padding we put on bottom. So we'll be working with padding and spacing a little bit more in our titles and entries, but padding right now think of it as internal spacing. It is a spacing between by like pixel or viewport height between the element and the elements inside it. So we style the nav tag and we said padding top, padding bottom. And inside the nav tag now gives spacing between at the top and bottom between the elements inside it. So this journal H1 tag, you can see, doesn't have any spacing from the actual text itself as far as height, because that all came from the nav tag. And you can scroll down and see that this is in your dev tools, this is a great way to visualize what padding and margin is. So you have your actual element in your nav, and then you have the space pattern. So the element, the padding, which is the internal spacing between other elements inside that element. So like the nav tag and the H1 tag, your border of your actual element, and then the margin outside of it, outside of the element itself. So if I was to say margin bottom, something really huge, this is actually not that big, but anyway, 50 pixels. And I want to reload my screen. Wait, I did not write that. Oops. Okay, excuse me. What I just noticed was the errors. So this coding editor will be really gracious, tell you if there's any errors when they try to read your code. And that X mark was telling me that I did not put a semicolon at the end. Anyway, so now you can see that there's huge spacing after the element, between the elements outside of the element that we styled, also the elementing. Basically, margin is the external spacing between elements. So if I take this margin away, there's going to be no spacing between any elements next to it or elements relative to it, and that's margin and padding. We'll be actually writing some margin in the next steps as well. So we just styled the nav, and if you're following along, I'm going to be heading over to part 3 of the tutorial now. I'm going to give you guys a few seconds, but I do see that I'm running just slightly tight on schedule. Again, you can always access this workshop through the tutorial and then also through the YouTube channel, not Qoom's YouTube channel, this hackathon's YouTube channel. Okay, so next we're actually going to stay within this CSS file, and we're going to style the footer.
Alexa?
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah. Would you explain again how do you bold the text?
How do I bold text? Yeah. So there's a specific property. I don't know if I won't be able to bold the journal because that's already bolded. But actually, if I pick over the footer element and then I say text weight, I believe, I know it's not text weight, it's font weight. And the font weight property, you can also see that the IDE will be nice enough to tell you if that's an actual like property. I'm just gonna give me some space at the bottom. And it'll tell you it is not a property. So, because it's not in pretty blue. So that's how you know that what you're trying to write is wrong. Another way to show errors. So the correct property is font weight. And then there's different types of values like bold. I believe there's a way to write italicized, thin, I believe. I have to double check. But again, you can always Google font weight. I can do that right now. Font weight values CSS. And there's probably a W3 article that'll help you a lot. Or Udacity. And I was right. Beautiful weights, which will just change, again, kind of the chunkiness of the text. And so I'm going to leave it there for just a second. I'm going to start writing in the footer styling. So a lot like the nav, we want the width to be 100%. So it spans 100% of the website. Oops, I did not mean to do that. And we'll just close that out and close the HTML part background. And so we're going to write the same kind of lines of code which you see in line 10 and 11. So I'm just going to text line center. And now I'm going to introduce you into CSS positioning. Now, what CSS positioning is, it's kind of a lot of things. So remember how I said that there was certain default values? I'm going to keep coming back to that. The default value for position is, I believe, default. Like, I think that's what it's called. It's called default. Or no, excuse me, static. And basically that means that the position of the element is rendering in the order that it's read from. So top to bottom, as I said. Basically, the positioning is relative to other positioning of the elements. And that's actually kind of another position itself. It's called relative, which they're kind of interchangeable, just in the sense that the elements will try to fit together as close as possible. Okay, just gonna move that. What we want is very specific and special position type, and that will be in the footer. So the footer, we want it to not be relative to the spacing next to it. We don't want it to be absolute either. What absolute is basically telling the computer that this element would be only relative to its parent or ancestor element. So a good way to kind of visualize that is like cookies, like accept the cookies on different websites or ads where you can't, they're always there at a very specific spot on your screens, and you can't move them away no matter where you scroll. That's absolute. It's absolute to the browse, to the viewport itself, to the web page itself, which means that the different values we set to it, like positioning, for example, left 0 pixels and then bottom 0 pixels. So that's what I mean by positioning. It then will stay in that very specific spot, pixel-wise or viewport width, or whatever way you want to measure it in that web browser. So because its position is absolute, which means that this element can have different positioning compared to like it's just sticking as close as possible to its other elements, it will now be free rendering on the web page. So that means that it's allowed to do this. So as you can see, when I did that, it moved to the bottom 0 pixels away from the left and 0 pixels away from the bottom of the screen, the viewport. And that's what absolute allows you to do. Another positioning element that allows you to do that is actually something called fixed. Now, fixed is a little bit the same thing. That's what actually absolute acts like, and what fixed and absolute are interchangeable in that sense. It's basically telling the computer that this element's positioning is only relative to the screen. So again, you could put elements on top of each other, like an image on top of text, or like an icon or an SVG on top of different filing. Excuse me, not filing, another type of different image or different text or different coloring. That's what position, fixed, and absolute allows you to do, because the positioning is now more customizable. Whew, and that was a lot. And if you didn't exactly understand all of the different values of positioning, I completely get that. I probably didn't explain it as clearly, but thankfully in our tutorial, you can see all of, I believe, the 6 different options for positioning, and with a little bit more deeper explanation of them. But as far as styling our footer, I believe there's a couple more things. Yes, there is. Background. So I just deleted the tab for this, but now you can change your background to whatever you want, or you can leave it white. But I want to make it this pretty blue, which doesn't match my pretty purple, but that's all right, and my color white. So it's the same thing as the nav styling, except it has very specific positioning, stating that it'll be at the very bottom and left of the website. So if I hit display, you'll also see that this footer is at the very bottom of our website and won't change. Okay, I'm going to try to give a little bit longer break so everyone can catch up, and then I will explain margin and padding classes and IDs with our text entries. So I'll give you guys a few seconds to write down all of this code.
Alexa?
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, they're trying to code their own project. Would you mind show the database beta service to them?
Sorry, the database?
Yeah, that one.
Oh, yes.
There was a question whether they can use or connect to the database. So, yeah. So actually, the Qoom support the database service. Yeah. So here, you don't need to write the backend code, and then you can use the database service. Yeah, like that. You can click it if you have, the closed one. You can see the data is actually, like that.
You were explaining.
Yeah, that's our database beta service. Thank you, Alexa.
Yeah, no problem. I'm glad someone asked. I haven't used the actual new updated database service, but from just my few clicks using it is a lot easier and a lot more simple than the alpha.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Okay. 5 minutes to go. In 5 to 10 minutes to go, so we can style our entries. Now we can head back into our HTML file. If you're following along, and open up that main element. We're going to be putting some children in there. Okay, this looks a little bit different, but that's fine, than the demo project. But that's the power of customization. So now what I want to do is create some div elements. So once you kind of get into your website programming development journey, you're going to be using a lot of divs. And basically what divs do is second to nothing. They do nothing default wise, but it's a great way to organize your content. And so when people like other developers try to read your code, they can understand it. And also when you want to style a specific type or specific chunks of elements together, you're able to do that when you put it in a div or when in any element. Divs are just nice because you can use them any sort of way and customize them all the way you want. So a good way of why we're using div is because we want to have different entries, different H1 titles with like the title of today, the date and everything, and different like paragraph tags to write this is my first journal entry and other journal entries we have. And that's really pretty. I'm glad I chose this font. And we want to have different divs for different entries. So let's put let's wait for just a second. And now we can like say you want to have another entry for a title for tomorrow, which will technically be the day you're writing it. And that's how you can separate different entries you want and then also style them. So for example, a great way to style them is to put a class in them. What I mean is I want to style these specific divs, but say I had another div somewhere else like this, like a div outside of my main to be like the footer div or something. I didn't want to style all the divs by element. I wanted to style these specific divs, this div right here. And a way you can do that is by naming things via classes or IDs. So that way in your CSS file, you can scroll down to the very bottom, make a lot of space, and put a little period in front of your name. And what that means is it's telling the computer that this name is a class name. And so whatever element has this class name will be styled so. For example, if I wanted the color to be red, then all the text there will be red and none of the other text will be red. That wasn't in an element with the class entries. The difference between a class entries and say a ID of entries is again there's no fundamental difference, but the basic usage of classes and IDs is how often you want to use them. So it's improper a little bit. Actually, no, it's illegal for different elements to have the same ID. So this ID is specific to one element only. Classes, you can share and put them on as much elements as you want, like that, and they'll have a lot of different styling. IDs, you can only assign to one element. And that's going to be extremely important for when someone codes in JavaScript, because when you are in JavaScript and you want to change a specific element, you would be able to find that element with the given ID, like that. So I'm actually going to delete this ID and less confuse myself. And a way to style your IDs is, again, giving lots of space at the bottom, is by a hashtag instead of a period. But then also another way that you can style things outside of classes and IDs is using that child aspect. So say I wanted to style the header, only the header of the entries. So I could, a couple ways I could do that is I could give a class or an ID and be like header entries. That's not actual entries. Anyway, another faster way to do that is actually by, my zoom bar is like right on top. And another way to do that is actually denote the child of the element with the class entries. Basically, you have this name, which is a class, because that's what the period says. And then inside of any element that has the class entries, and there should be an H1 tag. An H1 tag as a child of the parent that has an element of entries will have this kind of styling. So the way that looks is that only H1 tags specifically that have the class entries or that have parents, which is again the parent element or the element outside of that has the class entries will be styled like such. So this H1 tag of journal isn't styled because it doesn't have the class entries, or its parent doesn't have the class entries. So if I had put the class entries here, then this H1 tag will also be styled with tab red font. And since it doesn't, it won't have that kind of styling, even though we're calling out the H1 element because it needs a class. And so what it actually is in our tutorial is some different cool way of margin writing. So in the styling for the header, I'm actually gonna have it have 12 pixels top, 0 pixels right, 12 pixels bottom, and 18 pixels left. Super fast, and that's called shorthand. And what this margin shorthand does is it gives spacing to margin left, margin top, margin right. I should actually say margin top, margin right, margin bottom, and margin left. Clockwise, it goes in a clockwise way of all 4 sides of the element, and you can style it quickly like this. So it's the same thing as saying margin top 12 pixels, not like that, 12 pixels, margin right 0 pixels, and all 4 of those lines, but just in one concise line there. And so that's how you can do margin. And again, to kind of visualize what margin is if we actually delete the tab, and if I display my website right here and I head over to the dev tools and open up until I find the header entries. So you can see here that compared to the nav bar, the orange is outside of the blue, where the nav bar, the orange is inside the blue. And what that means is that this padding is this margin is the external spacing, as I've said before, with elements. And so it has 12 pixels top and bottom, 18 pixels left, as I said. So you can see if we scroll down in the styles file that now there's numbers to the margin outside of the element, which is in the blue itself. And we can have different margins for if we want to denote different spacing. So for like our paragraphs, this is again all arbitrary, like you can style it however you want. But as for the tutorial, like say, this is just personal preference. I don't like this close-up spacing. That's why I changed it in the beginning. But for this one, I want it to have 0 pixels top, but this time 12 pixels to the right and 0 pixels bottom, but 20 pixels left. And so what that does is, if you can probably guess, is not that. So reload it. Oh, you can barely see the change. We'll make that 30. Okay. Now it should be a little bit more clear. There we go. The different spacing. So this is the second kind of chance to try the margin shorthand, and that is again 0 pixels top, the spacing. So you can see that there is no orange at the top or bottom, and there's no space between the actual H1 tag and the paragraph tag, other than the margin that we put in the H1 tag. So if I was to say that the margin in the bottom is actually, oh, not that one, is actually 0 pixels, then the spacing externally between those 2 elements will be 0. That's what 0 spacing looks like. And so that's the difference between margin and padding. Whew, that was a little tight, but I'm gonna leave my code up so you guys can try to follow along. And I'll try to quickly answer all what's in chat that I didn't get to yet. A great way to actually end off is, number 1, we have a channel in SuperPOSITRON that we can answer any questions you want, or talk about the Best in Qoom challenge. And one way that you, again, can share your code to answer any questions or to talk more about like the database, as someone asked before, is hit publish. And then you can publish to the website, our website, which has other featured projects from hackathons. Like, that looks really interesting, Project Climate Callout. And then you can also share the link, so git link and the project link. You may share that with me or anybody just to showcase the world of your journal. That was the point of an online journal. But yeah, I'm gonna stop the share in just a few seconds. And I hope you guys are able to get something out of that. If you're able to follow along, hope that helped. If not, please feel free to reference the source code later. And happy hacking for the rest of this hackathon. Thank you so much for joining. And when do you display? How do you see the code? I'm sorry. To quickly answer Sophie's question, and then yes, I'll stay as long as I can to answer any questions. But feel free to start dropping down. Thank you again so much for joining. I really appreciate your time. So to answer your question, it would probably look like this. And a way you can navigate that, even with like this file, is just by clicking those arrows, so you can pop your website up again. To answer the DM about Python code, so I believe Qoom has a very specific Python console browser, and it would kind of depend if what you're trying to import is like library or framework. So right now we only support Python in Python, essentially. So Inara, do you want to say something?
What did you say?
Sorry, did you want to answer the question?
Oh yeah, is this a root cause question?
Oh yeah, someone was asking about if they can import Python code into Qoom.
They can import Python, you mean the PyWeb.io? What was the question exactly?
They're asking if they could import Python code and then from another platform and combine it with Qoom.
Actually, yeah, if I think I noticed that question as well. So if the PyWeb provides the Python environment using a script tag, then it can. So this is how you just showed that our Python console works on Qoom to provide Python in the web. Oh yeah, sure, yeah. You can add the images and videos to that as well. Does that answer your question, Eureka? Yeah.
To answer another question in chat, we'll be able to add pictures and videos. Yeah, I can actually show that right now because I have a couple images prepped. Images are just think about it as another element that you can add. So, like an image tag, that's it. So, a way to actually upload your image through a couple of different ways, like your at import, you can upload a URL of an image, or you can hit upload on your Qoom IDE and upload a file. So I was doing a couple different things for Qoom. So that's just the warning, and then you should see it in Python. So actually, this is really useful. If you click the 3 buttons, and then that'll open a little sidebar menu, and click copy image link. What you're able to do is within your source value, just copy paste that, which is a URL link. And so I'm just gonna open this up on the side. You can see that my image is now there. And you, just like any other element, you can style the width and the height, even the colors and opacity. I think that's really cool. And with absolute positioning and different CSS positioning, you could put this image like on top of this title image or on the bottom, so you can like match the eyes for title of today or something like that.
Alexa, Samia asked, is it okay if you go on the sorry, HTML?
Yeah, that's right here. And then if you wanted to actually use my code itself, I can just share you my editor view link as soon as I move Zoom again. And anybody can share or anybody can edit my code. Just clone. It would ask you to clone it down, and then you could just create on top of this.
Yeah, if you go to that link, which Alexa just put on the chat, then you can see the clone button there, and then you can just clone it and then build your own journal from there.
Yeah, that part is super fun because I love to just kind of copy. There's this, if you go to like a creator group, which is, I believe, one of the prizes for those who are still listening for Best of Qoom or Best Use of Qoom Challenge, is that I think you will get a chance to be invited to our creator group. And it's just I believe an apprentice level exclusive group of high schools and college stage people that are coding real world Qoom projects. So there's this specific one that I love looking at. I don't remember where it was. It was a COVID checker, this one. And what I did was like clone this down, and I was very interested because they use the database login, or excuse me, database to actually have some login signups. So you can like log in and do whatever you need to do. And then this beautiful like select all and pass results, another use of the database, is super cool. And I cloned that down a while ago as well. Way to do that is just, I believe if you go to source code with the same link that I sent, kind of like the edit tag, and then you just clone. That's really fun to do. But yeah, I definitely overstayed my welcome. Just gonna stop the Zoom. So sorry, so sorry. I love answering questions. Okay, I'll hand it off if it needs to be handed off. But again, I dropped the Discord link, I believe, as well. So if you have any more questions, feel free to just @ me or join the Discord and do that, or @ me on the SuperPOSITRON's Discord channel.
All right, thank you guys so much for coming to this workshop. And we actually have one that started at 5, our intro to Figma workshop. So if you guys want to join that, you can also head over there. All right, thank you guys so much.